The next part I want to show you is the Wiggler tool. The Wiggler tool sounds exactly as it is named. It helps you wiggle your layers. So what I mean by that is basically it'll take individual keyframes or two different keyframes and randomize the numbers in between. And I'll show you in a few seconds what I mean by that. So what I want to do is, since right now we have Tangent Lines Animation Presents The Angry Teenager, it goes away. What I want to do is, in between the word angry teenager and presents, I want to add something else and I want to wiggle that or apply the wiggle effect and show you all how that works. So I'm going to just move that layer back, this layer, so I have some extra time here. And I'm going to also introduce another text thing, and we'll just call it something like, I don't know, a PGCC collaboration. And I'll change the color, text color of that, just so that it looks different and stands out. And we'll change the stroke. I'm just going to change the stroke to black. You can't see it because it's black against black. And of course, you can, if you really want to see it, you can turn on or change your composition settings to another color. I typically don't like white. I'll pick like neutral gray or green or blue. So I'll pick neutral gray in this case. And we want to start this right after that intro goes away. Tangent line presents. And what I want to do with this is just, again, just have it fade in. So we're going to just control the opacity here. So as soon as this goes away, we'll have this fade in. And sometimes you don't want to wait. And again, we're using 10 frames, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And insert the keyframe. I'll go back to this one and change that to 0 so that it just appears. But this is what I mean by you don't want to wait. As soon as this goes away, this comes up. Just remember the timing. You don't want your audience to wait for a couple of seconds. A couple of seconds is way too long for what's happening on screen, and your audience will just basically go away in boredom. And if you have it too close, like it appears before the other one goes away, then you're basically um, things are basically running into each other, and that's also not good either. So you want to get your timing just perfect so that it shows up, but not too soon and not too late. And I'm going to adjust if I don't have any position keyframe options here, I can adjust the position, and I'm just going to leave it like that. So now what I want to do in this case is, as soon as it fades in, or even as it's fading in, what I want to do is I want this to shake a little bit to just kind of bring the attention to the audience, the attention of this to the audience. So that's where the wiggle tool is going to help me, because I can go to position and just basically do this every couple of keyframes, and that will take a really, really long time. And that's not, I don't want to spend too long on this. So what we're going to do is just remember we want to put in the initial position. So this is where it's going to be. And we also want it to end at that same position after it does some shaking. So we're going to keep this keyframe around so that we can, I'm going to move this keyframe to the front, and I'm going to copy it and Control C to copy. Highlight the keyframe, Control C to copy, and then Control V to paste. That way I have this initial keyframe because I will need it later to copy and paste at the end of that shaking sequence. But in the meantime now, what I can do is starting at this keyframe and going for about, shaking for more than a second would be a little bit too long. I'm going to go for about 12 frames. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's half a second because we're working on 24 frames per second. But what I'll do is I'll go another 4. So we're at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 frames. All right, at this point, what I'm going to do is just move it, somewhere else. And in order for the Wiggler tool to work properly, you basically have to have two different values of the keyframe. So here's my first value, my second value where it's different. And what the Wiggler tool will do is basically create all these individual keyframes in the middle, which will kind of wiggle the animation as it moves towards the other position. And we can all adjust this later as well. I'm going to go 4 more frames and copy that initial keyframe for the position and paste it at this point so that basically it comes back here. And if you think this is too much, you can kind of adjust your middle keyframe here. And now what I'm going to do is bring up my Wiggler tool. Once I have those three initial two, it takes at least 2 keyframes, but once I have these 3 initial keyframes, I'm going to bring out my Wiggler tool, and you can just go to Workspace. I typically do animation for my workspace, so I have all of these things here. And what I'm going to do is go to the Wiggler, click on that once. It won't let you do anything because I don't have any keyframe selected. So now if I zoom into my timeline and if I select my one, shift, and select the other two, then the Wiggler tool comes alive and it's going to ask me, what do you want it to do? Do you want it to apply to the temporal graph or the spatial graph? We actually want it to change in space, not change over time. So we're applying this to spatial. So it's going to move the object instead of change the timing of the object. The dimensions, what that means, do you want X and Y dimensions to be moving at the same time, or do you want them moving independently? We want all of them moving independently. And the frequency, how many times per second do you want this to happen? Let's push up the frequency a lot. 40 is too much. Let's do 10. Actually, 10. And the magnitude, like how much of a change do you want it to make? One won't give you a great magnitude right off the bat, and you will have to experiment with this. And that it's a fun tool, so you might like it and experiment a lot depending on what you want it to do. So for the magnitude, I'll bump that up to 20 because I kind of want it to really be very over the top at this point. And then I'm going to hit apply. Once you do that, you'll see that it created all these keyframes here, and you can see the motion path here. And now if I hit the preview, see, that's what it does. Now, to me, that's not enough of a magnitude. So I'm going to undo, Control Z or Command Z, and I'm going to change the frequency. Now I'm going to go over the top and change the magnitude to like something like 120. And I'm going to change this from smooth to jagged because I don't want it to have a very smooth movement. I want it to be jagged. So I'm going to hit apply. Look at all those keyframes it made. Set my work area closer to where the action's happening. And so that's what the Wiggler does. And you can apply this to anything. Let's say you wanted to rotate. You would do the same thing. Let's say you wanted to rotate back and forth randomly. I'm going to create a couple of keyframes here. You just need to make sure that that last keyframe goes back to the origin if that's where you want it to stop, the original point. Now I'm going to select all of these rotation points. And let's say I want it smooth because I don't know how it's going to look. That we're going to change the timing on this because this is rotation only allows you to use the temporal option. We're going to change the frequency to something like, let's do half of that, so 30 times per second, and we'll leave the magnitude to 120. So now I have all of these keyframe, and this is what it'll do. And of course, it's going to all look crazy when you apply the blurring effect. And as one thing this does is it already applies the temporal or the Bezier option, so you don't have to change the linearity or anything like that. And I want it to start there. And after it finishes, we're just going to apply opacity again, just like usual. And we're going to go 6 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and turn that down to 0. I'm going to, at this point, I'm also going to split my layer. So edit, split layer, so that I can get rid of the rest of this. And then I'm going to have my angry teenager animation. The words angry teenager appear on screen. So that's going to be my short, less than 10 seconds. And then I'm going to just make some final changes here, split work area here because we don't really need that. And I'm going to push our angry teenager words does not appear until these keyframes. So I'm just going to push this back so that I have some basically what I call layer management. So your layers look cleaner and better and easier for you to kind of just manipulate. And we can change the background to something else, other maybe the correct background if you're thinking about rendering it as is, or you just want to experiment with different background colors. So maybe this part doesn't stay around as long. I want to adjust the opacity to appear a little bit later so that we give the audience some time to digest the material and read it. And then you'd add music to this if you want. I feel like that's still too short of a time, so I'm going to move that over because this is a lot. Obviously your um, audience won't be able to read that, so you want it to hold for a little bit longer, basically a second per line of text or per word of text is about right. So there you go. That's working with the Wiggler tool and incorporating it into motion graphics as well.